Gaming reviews done quick, up and down and all around with the 1 minute rundown. I'm OC Trinity, your host, and I've got places to go, gotta follow my rainbow as I run down Sonic the Hedgehog. A few episodes back we looked at Sonic's 2D game, so let's step it up to 3 dimensions. It's a fast-paced platformer game where you collect rings as defense against the bad guys as you destroy robots and race to the goal point of the level. Though afterwards there are side missions to completing levels like meeting a certain time goal or collecting extra items. Sonic has 2 distinct generations to his 3D games, and the first tended to emphasize a lot of different characters, with each having different abilities or stage goals. About 10 years and 4 main series games later, this changed to just specialize in Sonic's trademark speed, where rings also double as fuel for an instant speed boost. The general consensus is that compared with many classic gaming outcomes that have been around this long, Sonic has had a hard time transitioning to 3D. Let's take a look at the good, the bad, and the ugly here. This has 6 playable characters and each has different abilities and objectives, so this is going to be easier to take case by case. Sonic does his usual high-speed action to reach the end point in the stage, and it feels like the first half of the game is just showing off for a warm-up, but the second half was pretty solid. Tails has abbreviated versions of Sonic stages where he has to race to the end, and it's a pretty similar experience. Knuckles' levels are more compact, but has him collect 3 emeralds to finish, making them into miniature collection games. Amy has a campaign that's too short where she's looking for safe haven while being chased by a killer robot. Big the Cat has a fishing game that's just painful, and Gamma has run and gun levels against the clock where shooting enemies adds time back. And I kind of wish I could find more games like it, actually. Speaking more generally, though, the camera is not cooperative. There's a hub world that feels like it's slowing things down more than adding any actual substance. There's a few weird random control glitches. There was a time where the Sonic fanbase seemed to hail this as the last good Sonic game, and I'm going to openly and strongly disagree. Good, fine, but certainly not as good as his Genesis days. I don't even get why they said last good game either, because even the next game addresses most of my complaints to the point that I'll recommend it universally over the previous game. No more hub world, better level design, a more enjoyable post-game thanks to extra missions and level segments impossible to find on your first try, a more cooperative camera, and only 3 base character types, and probably the best 3 from before. The good guys and the bad guys have different stories and levels, but pretty much the same basic gameplay. Sonic and Shadow's gameplay is pretty much the same as before, while Tails and Dr. Eggman pilot a mech that's similar in control to Gamma's levels. Not as fast and more about shooting everything, but still enjoyable. Knuckles and Rouge continue collecting items, but between much larger areas and Radar only being able to track gems in the order they're displayed, this feels like the bottleneck in an otherwise solid variety pack. New abilities are in almost every level, though maybe half of them are required to finish the level they're found in, and consequently the game, though the idea of having things to find in a level that actually matter for more than just completion is certainly a plus. Keeping from before, they've decided to include multiple teams where each character has a direct counterpart, 1 speed, 1 power, and 1 flight character. But this time you'll travel with the whole team and switch characters on the fly. And you'll be switching a lot since each level segment and enemy type usually favors one over the other, but there's enough guidelines to help you know who's good at what and enough variance to allow multiple solutions. In short, it's multiple characters done well. Admittedly, the teams and the levels they go through are so similar that you might as well just label them normal, hard, easy, and mission mode. But having consistent gameplay feels like it's a step these games needed. There's also a loose level-up system where characters can get slightly stronger or use more powerful abilities, though it's a temporary boost that resets after each level or death. Unfortunately, this one gets hammered a bit with the lack of variety between characters' levels and the tendency for the camera to end up in the wrong spot. Also, the second half of the game feels too much on rails. Literally, rails, like the kind skateboarders grind on. Still though, this was consistently fun and varied enough for me to recommend. Everything you've probably heard about this game is true. This game is a train wreck. The sad part is, though, it's a train wreck for all the wrong reasons, mostly in regards to glitchiness and erratic controls. You've got automatic sequences that don't play out correctly, or that have alternate ways around that clearly weren't intended. There are 3 different lead characters, each of which occasionally tag out with other characters, and it feels like there's a direct proportion between how often you'll use them and how much their abilities seem to actually work as intended, or how smoothly they control. Characters traverse the same locations, usually with exactly the same map, but with such radically different abilities that for every example of a well-designed level killed by horrible execution, you've then got 2 examples of a terrible level overkilled by horrible execution. The hub world a la Sonic Adventure 1 returns, still feeling like it's just padding complete with side missions that don't really serve any purpose other than 100% completion. Most of the difficulty here is due to characters not controlling how they should. This could have been a good game, but as it is, it's a textbook example of why testing a game is so important. Before I start the clock here, the next game was released on multiple systems with differences. The Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 versions of this game are, for all intents and purposes, the same thing. The PS2 and Wii versions are, ignoring motion-based controls, also the same thing. But these two groups aren't the same as each other, having similar base gameplay but different levels and execution. But this is the version I'm reviewing, and it's a wild game of good news, bad news here. Sonic Unleashed plays on a new engine that deserves a lot of credit for being able to handle this much speed without being completely overwhelming. You'll go through levels based loosely on real-world locations blisteringly fast and with the same multiple paths the old games were capable of, especially given that rings also convert into energy that can be used for an instant speed boost. There's a little overabundance of quick-time events and the capability to go so fast that you'll go careening off the course, but beyond that you'd have what would have been the best Sonic games to date, if that's all the game contained. See, at night Sonic transforms into a werehog, while the new engine transforms into a mediocre God of War clone, with enemies that seem to take too long to kill and new techniques that rarely add anything beyond looking cool. And considering these levels are about 3 or 4 times longer, far less likely to result in losing lives, but far more useful to allocate experience points towards, it's so much of a contrast to the daytime levels that just clashes with the whole experience. You'll probably enjoy this if you've got the patience to sit through the night levels, though. Sega seemed receptive to the complaints from before, considering the basic flow essentially is Sonic Unleashed today's stages, along with having a larger number of shorter stages. The plot centers around Baldy McNosehair using an amusement park as a front for his real goal of harnessing the power of wisps, an alien species who in turn provide this game's most distinguishing characteristic, a few one-shot movement or attack abilities. Almost every level has 1 or 2 of them available, and for the most part they're used pretty creatively, though some feel like they have no real purpose other than to collect optional items. And yet, I had a hard time really getting into this, and the best explanation I can give as to why is that the game doesn't feel very consistent. What I mean is that there seems to be a huge amount of variance between levels' length, difficulty, theme, or even fun, even between levels placed right next to each other, and controls tend to switch in ways that don't make a lot of sense. The same button as Turbo Boost in certain segments, but Break in another. And on that note, I'm not really a fan of Turbo requiring a separate item to energize. This is definitely a step in the right direction, but still leaves room for improvement. You know how games will occasionally toss a level into a game that's pretty much an update or a throwback from a previous game? Well, this game is built around that concept twice over. See, this game consists entirely of levels from the past, but reimagined once as if they were created as a classic Sonic game, and once again as a modern game, and of course spaced out with boss fights that'll also look familiar to anyone well-versed in Sonic's history. Not exact recreations, but taking a few memorable moments and the themes as a whole, and as far as throwbacks go, it's one of the best concepts I've seen given the series' evolution. But as a complete game, it's one that I feel that fans of both old and new games will agree is probably among the best you're going to see here. It's another excellent mix of old and new game design where levels have a seamless mix between difficult platforming and simple raw speed, as well as so many of the multiple paths the old games were so great at. As far as bad points go, though, the last couple levels seem like they were called in, and unless you plan on doing all the optional missions, the game feels short by modern comparisons. But I don't think either of those will stop anyone from agreeing that Sonic still got it. So this had an interesting progression with my thought process here. See, at first I thought this was going to turn into a talk about how much it seems to be borrowing from other games to the point of identity loss, as the game feels like Sonic trying to be Super Mario Galaxy, except with Mario 3D Land's controls and New Super Mario Bros. Progression of world themes, with the end result being that the game feels slower paced than the last several entries. But I've had that talk many times already, and the further I got in, realized, no, the real talk I need to have is about intuitive game design. Far too much of this feels like it's about learning new concepts the first time around, then immediately getting killed if I don't, especially with the wisps returning from Sonic Colors. Sonic has a few different ways to attack, but they're similar enough to the point that I couldn't figure out which one I should be using on most enemies until taking a hit for using the wrong one. Sonic can run up walls, but doing that is mapped to the run button, making it easy to do this accidentally, and wall jumping is similarly easy to mess up. Still though, there's enough fun levels that once you get used to this game's weird eccentricities, it's still an enjoyable game. And that's it for Sonic. There's a few spin-offs that probably could have been covered here as well, a few of which have some similar gameplay mechanics, and there's enough of them to do a whole episode centered around them. There's also, of course, a larger number of handheld games. As of 2010 or so, they've had the same names as the main series of games given here, but not the same gameplay, and there's enough of those to do a whole episode centered around those as well. And as a reminder, there already was a whole episode centered around the 2D games. Sega has teased they plan to make a new Sonic game sometime this year to coincide with the character's 25th birthday, but as of this recording haven't actually announced anything much beyond its existence. We'll see what happens and remain cautiously optimistic. In the meantime, check back soon for one of Sega's more recent and well-received franchises. See you then, and until then, you gotta go fast.
Would the owner of a yellow car, license plate 1NOM155, please report to the main gate? Your vehicle is in the path of an asteroid, and it's about to get smashed. Oh, never mind.